right, everyone, thank you for showing up bright and early. I've been joking with these guys, if you're going to hoop with the Owls at night, you got to soar with the Eagles in the morning. So this is the crew that's ready to rip and get better. At least for me, the way I'm going to feel good about myself is you guys are the ones that really want to get better, and I'm going to use that to stroke my own ego this morning and hopefully help these guys feel a little bit better about getting up early and helping us out today. But I'm Adam Morrow. I'm co-founder of FlexPro Grip. My co-founder is over there. That's Daryl. We've been at this together, I guess, really since 2018, and we really started on this journey to figure out why UCLs tear. It was never to create a device. It was just try to figure out why UCLs tear. And after spending a little bit of time in the process, we felt like we had a pretty good idea of how we could do something about it and ultimately decrease injury risk and put these guys in a better position to ultimately accomplish their dreams. Now, why we're here today, or why we are actually doing this presentation rather, is probably going to seem a little bit different from what you guys are used to when you come to these kind of seminars, conventions, whatever. Every single time you step into one of these, and it was on example yesterday, and it's not bad, but you hear from coaches, professionals, clinicians, whoever, on how you should be talking to your players, how you should be presenting that information to the players. Well, now we're going to flip that on its head, and we actually have players to tell you what's valuable to them, how they perceive that information, how they want to be approached with it, and how you can take truly actionable things back to your teams, clubs, what have you, to maybe have a more productive conversation or a more fluid introduction to data, information, and storytelling to ultimately get your crew closer to what you're trying to accomplish. So who we have on the panel today, I'm soon to kick this off to these guys and actually let them do the talking, the lion's share of what we're going over today. But we have MILB free agent Josh Hejka. He also works at Driveline. We have Dawson Netz, just finished his rookie campaign with the Cubs. Blake Morningstar, Wake Forest Junior, hoping to see his name get called here this coming spring after winning national championship, right, Blake? That's right. That's what we got to do first. Yeah, accomplish things in order. And Aiden May, who just finished his rookie campaign with the Marlins. So the colleges on these guys: John Hopkins, D3 grinder from Josh Hejka with a little bit of indie ball experience as well. So obviously we love him the most because that's probably closer to most of us in this room, those who couldn't hack it, but he just figured it out along the way. Dawson Netz went to University of Arizona, was a free agent sign out of Arizona after his 5th year and serving as a grad assistant on the staff. So definitely a unique approach into baseball. Blake still has an entire future ahead of him. So we're just going to rely on him to be the bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, really good college baseball player and just talk about his learning experiences along the way. And Aiden has hopped around a little bit. Maybe he beat the normal college transfer portal route to maybe, we'll say he paved the way for the current path of the normal college athlete. But he finished out his college ball at Oregon State before being a competitive balance pick to the Marlins. So that is ultimately why we're gathered here, how we came together. All these guys, at one way or another, brought FlexPro Grip into their own development, whether it was forced by a coach or it was under their own accord. And that's really where we are going to kick things off for these guys to go into what this means to them, why the data and information is important, and we'll just have the panel discussion from there. So I don't know, I guess we'll start with Josh, seeing how Josh is the one that actually brought it on for a medical need. He had Tommy John back in 2023, correct? So with this, there's no point in me telling his story. I'm going to kick it over to him for ultimately why he brought FlexPro Grip in, and then we'll just take it down the line.
What's up, everybody? Yeah, as Adam did mention, I am a free agent, so if you know any scouts, please let me know. In 2023, I had Tommy John, and I think my journey with FlexPro Grip kind of started. I was actually just talking to Dawson about this. It's kind of working backwards from this question of like, what is the demand that's going to be placed on me when I'm in a game, and how do I best prepare myself for that demand? And with FlexPro Grip, I think the big thing for me was, especially coming off Tommy John, I had an FDS tear in my elbow as well, is making sure that my elbow was fully adequately prepared for the demand that I was going to be placing on it in a game. I'm a big believer in physical preparation. I'm a big believer in workload management. I see Casey Mulholland in the back of the room. Looking forward to his presentation tomorrow. But like, these are tools in our tool belt that we can use to make sure that an athlete has the capacity to handle the demand that we're going to be placing on them. So I think that's like a very important thing to work backwards from, rather than starting with your perception of like what the right thing to do is, to work backwards from like what the athlete is actually going to be doing in a game. But ever since then, I've been using FlexPro Grip. Have noticed a massive increase in strength in my forearm, strength in my forearm muscles, and I continue to have it as part of my routine even now that I'm healthy. But yeah, I'll pass it along. I'll keep the train rolling.
Yeah, so I got introduced to FlexPro actually last year here, and I played 5 years at the University of Arizona. Didn't have the level of success that I wanted, didn't get signed. I mean, I was a rookie this year at 25 years old, and I didn't figure out a lot of things until I was a coach and stopped playing. So I was starting to go down the rabbit hole once I stopped playing and started my graduate assistant career, and started to figure out some things of like, okay, you know what, like all these things that I'm learning and the people that I'm fortunate enough to be around, like, all right, let's start to put some of these things into play, and started to focus on workload management, moving better, using force plates, and like understanding more about myself, the physical constraints that I have, and using that and leveraging it in a way where I can get the most out of myself. And got to the point where I started throwing really hard, and I was like, wow, it's really this easy? I'm just kidding, it wasn't easy to play. But putting a lot of these things I was learning into play and figuring out, wow, like if I have a targeted approach and I do my research and understand like what I'm doing and how to use it, like I can actually get more out of myself. And met Adam here last year and figured out like, okay, the stuff that I've done and the research I've done on isometrics, like there is nothing better for your elbow right now than FlexPro Grip, and understand, okay, I've had elbow issues in the past, like this is something I need to integrate into my work every day, and was something that allowed me to throw pain-free this year for the first time ever, and I threw 70 innings for the first time in 6 years. So I think that was a big part of that, and something that really helped me in my journey.
So Adam kind of hit on it a little bit as he was introducing us all, but my journey with FlexPro is, from start to finish has been about as boring as it gets, to be honest. Coach Muscara, my pitching coach for my freshman and sophomore year, basically just kind of forced it upon us. Like he believed in it. He had a really good relationship with Adam, and he thought that it was something that was going to keep us healthy, keep us on the field. It was something that he prioritized really over everything else in our development. So it was forced upon us my freshman year. I believe that was the first year Wake Forest started using FlexPro Grip, and ever since then I've been using it. I've been healthy. My forearm has gotten stronger. My spin rates on my fastball, on my breaking pitches, like everything has gone up, everything's increased, and I feel healthier than ever. So that's pretty much my story.
I've had a lot of time now with FlexPro. I think I got introduced to it about 2.5, 3 years ago by my coach right here in the front, who, that's one of the most important things is you have a coach that you trust, whether that's college or pro or wherever, you got a coach that you trust. And so I got introduced to it through him. And the biggest thing was, like, I never had a problem on the field. I always had fantastic stuff, and I got results, but I've had, numerous injuries at this point. And so the best way that, the best ability is availability. If you can't be on the field, if you can't, produce, then there's no point to any of the training that you're doing. And I think that FlexPro does this in a way that's unconventional. I think that everyone gets bogged down with they have to do something because everybody else is doing it. And in training differently with FlexPro, it's the same ideas of a lot of forearm strength, but it's taken into a level that is so specified and so, I guess, correct, that you just can't deny it. And the results are going to speak for themselves. Obviously, these guys have had examples of all of that, and I've had a lot of anecdotes with that as well. But FlexPro so far has just been fantastic. It's everything that I've asked for, and probably more. So I've got a lot to say about it.
Well, thanks guys for the really solid intros. Also, if you couldn't tell, these mics aren't for you. This is for us trying to record on an iPad. So you feel free to make fun of us or moving these little mini mics around. But one question coming off of that, and we'll use Hejka here as probably the closer, seeing how he likely has the closest relationship with data of anyone in here, given his side job with Driveline, or I guess primary at the moment. Remember, free agent here, anybody? But maybe we'll kick it off with Aiden, back to you, and maybe we'll send it down the line. What has the data enabled you to do? Obviously, that's why a lot of these people are here. How do we apply the information that we're actually getting? I love to hear that you guys are feeling great coming off of FlexPro. Blake did mention what he's seeing metrically advance, like how FlexPro is helping him eventually on the field. But whether it's data coming from the device and actually having that in hand, rather than having to go elsewhere or rely on someone else for the data, do you feel empowered by that? Is it useful for you to have it? I'd love for you to just kind of take that away.
I mean, I'm a big believer that any information is right when it's correctly applied. Obviously, information can go wrong very quickly, but the more information available, the more things you have to make a decision on something. And in a game as complex as baseball, there's so many different things that you have to think about on a daily basis. And so with that, with throwing comes the risk of hurting yourself. And so if you have information on, hey, this is pushing me in the right direction to protect myself better, that's going to give you peace of mind. That's going to give you a more confident approach to your training. You can train harder with better results if you're less fatigued, or if you just have a general higher base overall. And specifically on the data side, when it comes to health, like I was saying, is incredibly applicable, because I feel like that's such a space in baseball that's so wishy-washy. A lot of different coaches have different things that they like to say about health, but no one really knows. And this is the first, at least, elbow device that I've seen with objective data and results that you can track and you can progress through and really get a state of like, where am I at? And the best part is once you get those thresholds, then you can start doing fun training where it's spin rate training, or it's I guess RFD is spin rate training, but you're trying to apply force as fast as possible, and you're getting into different training that's not just health focused, right? The health is the base, but after that, then you start to do fun things, and you start to be open to more interpretation of the data. They've done obviously a lot of great studies with Driveline and with other programs that they're learning and constantly improving. And so when you get this updated data and you get this infrastructure more where it's tailored towards, all right, what's the best way I can stay healthy, and what's the best way I can progress and update myself as an athlete is just fantastic.
So I think kind of going back to Neeson and Ezra's presentation yesterday, like I believe that the player does drive their career. At the end of the day, a lot of the decisions come down to the player, especially as you start to mature and start to move through orgs or later in your college career, whatever it may be. I believe the player does drive the development. So like if for FlexPro, for example, like if my strength on a day that I do is down and I'm pulling like a 170, and for someone that throws 97 miles an hour, they need to be around 220. Whatever that looks like, I would like to know that, and I think that's super necessary in development, especially in something like FlexPro, because like Aiden said, like the best ability is availability. And if I can't stay on the field, if I can't stay healthy, then I'm not able to be out there for my teammates. I'm not able to help my team win. So whatever that looks like, I think it's important to have that information and to kind of to sift through it and see what's important, what do I need to really focus on here, and then just kind of have a good team around you. Like I have specific programming that comes directly from Adam, so things like that are super beneficial.
I'm in the group where I think having as much information as you possibly can is the most important thing possible. I think it's just being able to have the wisdom to differentiate, like, okay, what is a KPI? What is something that's actually going to be beneficial that I can use? But this is what helped me to bridge the gap from like, okay, like I know how to play the game at a high level, but my output in the game is not at the level that my brain is at. And it's like, okay, that's the beauty of baseball. It's like, okay, we can sharpen and clean up as much as we want off the field, but we still have to play a game at the end of the day. And I felt like I had the gamesmanship down, but it's like I had so much in the tank that I wanted to focus on to sharpen that off the field ability, and doing a lot of research into isometrics and understanding like, okay, how am I going to apply this to my arm care? How am I going to apply this to like the S&C side, and how do I match up all the peaks and the valleys with my workload and throwing throughout the week? And getting all of this information has helped me to craft a routine that's been super helpful. I mean, I was a guy in college where I was like the first one there, last guy there, just beat my head against the wall thinking like, if I'm there doing work every day, like I'm gonna be the best guy, and that wasn't the case. And now I've turned into the guy that's like there for 2 hours, super specific routine, and then I go home and I'm playing video games the rest of the day, and I'm not even thinking about it, right? So having this information has helped me to sift through things and be a little bit more efficient with what I'm doing. And with FlexPro specifically, like it allowed me to implement the isometric work that I was starting to do research on and do it in the most targeted, specific way possible that I knew was going to help me and in the different structures in my elbow that I was having issues with early on in my career.
I'm gonna slightly disagree or like buck the trend a little bit here. I do think obviously like as someone who loves information and data, like that it's important to have as much of that as possible. But I do think like it's very easy to go down rabbit holes, and I think like the role of the coach is kind of the guy who curates that information appropriately for the player. The way I like to think about it is things should be really, really complex on the back end in terms of like what you're looking into, like what's feeding into your models if you have models or your reports. But like on the front end, things should be as simple as possible. Like when I'm on the mound, I don't want to be thinking, okay, what's this guy's chase rate in 2 strike counts against this? I want to know what pitch I'm throwing and where I'm throwing it, and throwing it with full conviction. So I think being able to curate that information on the coach side to the players is really important. And then I'm also a big believer that like the primary role of data from a coach perspective is giving your players transparency in how you're evaluating them. And so whether that like whatever's important to you as a coach, whatever's important to your program, like your players should know where they're like the big 3 that I go to is where they are, like where they stand, where they've been, basically like how much they've already improved or gotten worse, and then where they're going. So I think like using data to frame those 3 things is like is in my opinion like the way you do it. In 2021 I was like I barely broke camp with the Mets organization, was like back into the roster, and I was like a little bit confused, and I was like, I had a good spring, I was getting guys out, and the farm director called me and he was basically like, yeah, you know you're getting outs, but we just don't project you to be a big league pitcher with the current velocity you're throwing. So over the next few months, I need you to prove to me that you're gonna like become a big league projectable pitcher. We're evaluating you as someone who's not currently a big league prospect. And I really appreciated that conversation. It probably wasn't very easy for him to like have that tough conversation with me, for him to tell me that he thinks I suck, basically, which I probably did. But it allowed me to frame my training for the rest of the season so that I could I knew how I was being evaluated, and I knew what I needed to do to be evaluated better. So I think that's kind of the role of data from my perspective. Yeah.
This is probably going to be more of a quick hitter on this next one because I'm going to guess, also based on some of our internal conversations, you guys feel similarly. When data potentially presents a risk or a shortcoming, is that something you want to know, or do you want to be handled with kid gloves through that? Anybody want to take that away from the jump?
Well, I think the most important thing in order to get player buy-in is that you're not keeping them off the field like if you're evaluating players and then whatever you just determine from that player is like keeping them off the field, they're not going to be bought in at all. This kind of goes back to what I was saying is like for example, if they're on FlexPro Grip and they have like a really low like finger strength score, you're like, oh no, you can't pitch. They're never going to use FlexPro Grip again. It's how do we now train the capacity to keep you on the field and keep you fully prepared for what you're about to be doing. I think that's the way you prevent players from giving up on like what you're trying to accomplish. It has to be framed in the way of keeping them on the field.
I think to that point too, kind of like I touched on, you need to have trust both ways. And I think if you're not transparent with everything, you won't build that trust. And that's not just about health, but that's about when you're developing your players and you're developing their confidence even. If you don't cultivate that trust, then when you come to them with something serious, they're not gonna, think anything of it. If they're just gonna think, oh, he's stopping me from throwing. And so a lot of it has to build off of the relationship between the player and the coach. And like Josh said, if you get somebody to use something and all of a sudden the reason that they can't play the game that they love is that thing, all of a sudden it just takes away the whole ability to converse about why it's beneficial. But trust is the most important.
You guys good on that one?
Yeah.
Cool. All right, now we'll probably move on a little bit to maybe bucking the system, as Hejka said earlier, where we might have some things that get, I don't know if I want to say controversial, but maybe some topics that are unique for you guys to hear as coaches, clinicians, people in charge. So this is the way that we framed it and went through our discussion, but at this point, everything is a choice, whether you're in pro ball, college, granted the timeline's a little bit tougher, but at this point, if you don't like something, you can transfer or leave. It's weird to say, but it is that true. Pro ball, you guys basically have autonomy over your own careers. Yes, other people decide whether you're in the lineup or not, but you can't be forced into doing anything. So given that everything is a choice, but the people in power, coaches, likely have a decision that they want you to make, what do you need from a coach to understand that decision-making process or succumb to the buy-in that they want you to have? Dawson, you want to start with this one?
Yeah. I think it's the coach's job to relay like the information and the criteria that you're being evaluated on, and then backing that up with like why and understanding like what results what results players in the past have been able to get from that, because I don't want to just take someone's word for it that they know something. Like I think your coach should generally know more than you, right? Like I don't think there is a specific moment where your coach will be like, oh, like I don't know, like and if that does happen, they need to figure out a way to learn more information to help the player feel like they have their best interest in mind. But just going back to the original question, it's like, okay, how do I use what they're evaluating me on to work on the things that they want me to get better at in the game that I'm being evaluated on? Because if you can build that trust and educate your players on what this is, it's just going to help you out. Like I know in my case specifically, like I didn't understand much, but once I did, I was in lockstep with our whole staff and understanding like, okay, this is what you want. I understand where you're coming from. I know this works. Like help educate me so that I can help you, because I want to do those things and I know that it works, and I trust you guys a lot with it. So
I would say the one thing that I kind of disagree with is when a coach doesn't know something. Like I think that's okay. I think especially when you're having really complex topics, talks with your players, it's okay to not know something, right? And one of the most important things is even if your players might not know something, they generally know kind of when you're blowing smoke up their ass, sorry. But so it's very important for me when I'm having a talk with my coaches that like, they might say like, I don't know something, and then we can progress through that. Because then when I know they tell me something, I know that they're coming at it with a real basis behind it, right? I know that they're not just, throwing an answer out there just to throw an answer out there. So I think that's important for me, is to hear that feedback from a coach.
I will say I actually slightly disagree with your disagreement. I think obviously you want someone to say I don't know rather than make up some bullshit and say it to you. I think saying I don't know is completely unacceptable from a coach if an athlete is asking why are we doing this. If an athlete is ever asking you why do we do this as a program, why am I doing this drill, why am I doing this, I don't know. I think that's completely unacceptable. And I also think that if you're always saying I don't know on the more complicated questions, at some point you just need to learn more things. Like, now, I don't know, maybe that's, but like you as an authority figure should know things that are tangential to the coaching process, whether that's, obviously you don't have to be an expert in physics, but like physics and anatomy and like these things play a role in pitching. And so like you don't have to be an expert, but knowing the people to go to get answers to the questions, and then whatever you are actually implementing with your athletes, having a reason and not just, I don't know. Like I don't think that's acceptable personally.
Yeah, and just to add to that, I mean, I've had arguments in the past with like, okay, like when you're throwing on the mound, you need to have this shin angle, and it's like, well, are you just saying that because you know something, like, or are you saying that because you're coming from a place of, okay, we've done your range of motion screen, we know you lack the adequate IR to get into a proper hinge position. Okay, I trust you because you told me this is how we're gonna coach and go about this. But if you're just like, well, no, it seems like everyone just has a good shin angle. Well, it's like I can't trust you, and that doesn't make any sense. So how can I go off of that?
I've had conversations with coaches where they've been honest and upfront, and they've told me that they don't know something, and then shortly thereafter they've told me that they would find out. And I think it's important as a coach, especially at like a university or in an org or something like that. Like I don't think you have to have everything figured out. Like in general, yes, I believe as a coach you should be smarter than your players. But I mean, at the end of the day, baseball is a complicated game. There's a lot of stuff that goes into it, like the anatomy and the physics and ball play, and so many different rabbit holes that go down. But I don't think you have to have everything figured out as a coach. But I think you need to have a team around you and people that you can rely on, where they have it figured out. Like as a coach, you don't have to be an expert on FlexPro Grip, but I think it's important to have Adam in your back pocket where it's like, okay, Adam's an expert on this, and you can kind of revert to him, things like that.
I will say I completely agree with Josh's point on the drill work. If you're doing a drill, you need to have a purpose behind it. I was more so talking about maybe a pitch design thing, or maybe a specific, like when we're talking about some way to transfer a specific skill, like in the realm of pitching. But if you're doing a drill, you should have a complete and utter full purpose behind that drill. There should never be a wasted drill or a random drill that's just thrown in there. So I completely agree with that point.
I want to keep going down this route actually, and one of the notes that we came to as a group when we were prepping for this is the global understanding versus local application. So now breaking that down, or at least what that phrase means to me, and I'll turn it back over to our panelists here, but we have players that are more or less expected to operate with blinders on. They're given a drill sheet, they're given a player development plan, and they're just told to be, like, go do this. Go off on your way, track it, put a radar gun up, all these things. Like, I'm gonna be your number one objective measurement fan, so I've got no issue with the tracking. But I think as people in a leadership position, or this position of guidance, the onus is on us to continue to have that global approach or that complete curiosity to drive you guys or do kind of the thinking for you in a sense, Josh, going back to what you said earlier, knowing that everything should be simple on the player side and complex on the back end. So Josh, I know this is something you were passionate about when we were going over this. I'm curious if you have anything else here on this global understanding concept.
Well, I do think it all kind of relates back to this, like the idea of a player knowing how they're being evaluated. And I also think it's important to recognize that, like, as a coach, like, if you have a guy who's never going to play for your college or your club, like he's a 20-grade prospect in pro ball, or like he's, back into the roster guy, like, knowing that you can, like, you're almost failing him if you're just giving him the same type of program as another guy that like is better or like is going to play. Like that's a guy you need to be taking like bigger risks with, and like they should be informed risks, right? But like knowing like, hey man, like this is like we're gonna like maybe put you through a more comprehensive velo program. We're gonna like try to drop your arm slot like some guys mentioned yesterday. We're gonna like we're gonna take some risks with you because otherwise you're just never gonna play baseball. Like you will never play for our team. And it's like, okay, like maybe the risk is that you get hurt. Maybe the risk is that you get worse at baseball. But like if the alternative is that you are just not good enough as you currently are, I think it's important that the coaches express that to you and express their plan for changing that. Yeah, that's what I got.
Yeah, I think having a global understanding of like each athlete specifically is super important. And just as an example, like when we do player plan meetings and the information we're presented, it's like, okay, what do your force plate jumps look like in the weight room? What does your biomech data look like on the field? What do your TrackMan reports look like? What do your range of motion screens look like? Where are you inadequate? Where do we feel like your proper ranges have been when you're operating at your best and your average fastball velo is the highest? And like, how do we keep you in those ranges and where do we kind of project you out to be? So I think having that global understanding for us is super helpful because then we can get specific with these are the ranges that you operate in and this is where you're the best at. Let's try to keep you there with all of the knowledge that we have around this. Now we can start to like pull out specific things to help you as an athlete stay kind of with those blinders on.
I think a big piece of it too, and to touch on what Josh said, great players can make you look like a great coach, but I think really what makes you a great coach is updating and helping the lower tier level of players, right? And so it's the best way to get through to the most amount of people. And a lot of organizations, I've talked to Dawson about this, is they fall in love with a certain thing or they get really hung up on something. And so when you talk about like globalization, you talk about really specified training, it's really important that you mean it, right? If we talk about we're getting specified and we're getting specific feedback to every player, but it's all just the same cookie cutter stuff, then that's not very global, right? That's not very applicable to anybody. If it's applicable to everybody, then it's not applicable to anybody. That's a bad generalization, but you understand the point of you want to have a specified program, but you want it to be truly tailored to each player. That may manifest in different ways, but you want to mean the things that you say, and you want to have a real intent behind them.
Blake, you want to keep cooking on this, or are you good?
Yeah, I got something. I think kind of as Dawson hit on with like the individual meetings, like all of the beneficial individual like one-on-ones that I've been in have involved kind of like a data dump at the beginning of the meetings, and like they really discuss like this year, for example, like I had a really in-depth conversation with Neeson about my location strategies and where my expected whip zones are, and where the shape on my pitches is going to play best, pre-2K and then 2K and so on and so forth. I just think like when you're making decisions, especially about a player's career, like everything needs to be informed. It really does, and I think to some point the cookie cutter stuff is okay, like for high school coaches and whatnot. Like there's some truth behind some of that stuff that has worked in the past, but as you start to grow and develop, like I think everything needs to be individualized, really. Like from an S&C standpoint, from a throwing program standpoint, like no individual is like another, and I think it's important to keep that in mind. And really, as a coach, just gain an understanding of who your athlete is, maybe what they've been through, what they've dealt with, who they are as a competitor. I think all these kind of factors should make an impact in your decision making.
Blake, I'm going to take that point and we'll try to peel back some of the layers on it. So you bring up this concept of individualization and I guess further going down that path, the higher up we get. Now, I would say from my side of serving in that coach role or being in a programming position, sometimes that can get difficult and then you're left just back to that problem we discussed earlier of I'm trying to make everything look different and then a player says, well, why am I doing this? And if my answer is, well, just because I don't want you doing the same thing as everybody else, because on this recruiting trip or whatever, we preach individualization. So what, now I'm gonna kick back to you guys. Do you think individualization truly needs to be, Josh has his own drill set, Dawson has his own drill set, Blake, Aiden, so on and so forth? Or it's more the intentions or the drivers behind the movement? So whether it's VBT in the weight room, whether it's individualized strength targets on something like FlexPro Grip, different workload units depending on your role in the staff, the throwing program or the overall development might look similarly, but the nuanced details are what's individualized. I'm curious if you guys have feedback on that, or even, I guess, your own experiences.
I think the misconception is that, specified doesn't mean different, right? And so something that might work for Dawson might work for me, but we're, like Blake said, we're completely different athletes. We move in different ways, we have different limitations, and we have different, mobility traits or different strength traits that leads to the way that we can all throw the baseball. And something that might work incredibly well for him might not work so well for me. And so specified doesn't mean different. Specified means targeted, correct analysis of what a player does good and what he does bad, and the best ways to improve on the bad. And so I think that the best ways that you can do that is with structured feedback from devices. If you don't have a device, everybody's got a radar gun, so everybody knows how to accomplish a task. And so making a task at the base level as easy as possible. Of everyone needs to throw harder. Now let's figure out how I can make this individual throw harder, right? And there's a lot of different ways to do that, but I think that that's the misconception. Specified doesn't mean different. It means tailored to that person.
Going off that a little bit, so for those who were at JP's talk yesterday, I thought he brought up a really good point that, actually the batted ball profile, so his point was basically that the batted ball profile of most elite hitters is actually pretty similar in terms of limiting ground balls, pull side air, damage in the air, right? But the individual movement solutions to get them to that batted ball profile are different. And so I think it's important to draw the distinction between individualized in terms of outcome. We want all pitchers to have high stuff and throw strikes, right? The outcomes are the same. How we necessarily get them there is going to be different, and how they move to get themselves there is very, very different. But even going further than that, I'm actually going to take a little bit of an anti-individualization take. At Driveline, we've kind of noticed that there's this, the bell curve meme or whatever. And so we've noticed that with very, very young athletes, and honestly with MLB guys, they don't actually need that complicated of training. And so the very, very young guys are just young training age. The MLB guys are guys who a lot of times, not always, have relied on talent more so than long-term physical development or long-term player development. And so those guys can actually make a lot of gains with very, very simple, I wouldn't say cookie cutter, but very, very simple programming. Obviously you have the guys in the middle, guys who have a really high training age, guys who have, spent 6 years in the minor leagues and haven't broke through. Those are way more difficult cases to crack. But I actually don't think you need, and this is probably a dynamic that exists on a lot of different college teams as well, is that you have guys who are completely undertrained, guys who are just really talented but never really have trained, and then you have the guys in the middle. And honestly, those outer buckets probably don't need the craziest, most individualized programs ever, simply because they are going to make a lot of gains just with the emphasis of different training. Like that.
Yeah, I think it's based on what you're trying to do. I think normative ranges can be a bad thing if you're trying to apply them to everybody. For instance, I know you guys saw some of the videos of the training that we do at the University of Arizona, and how specific it can get, and just a peek into what my off season looks like. So when I'm throwing at school and I'm working in the lab, there's specific moves that I'm working on, my initial unweight or my sit going down into my move, and it's these things we can put a number on and objectively track. I'm getting certain med ball drills or plyo ball drills from John in a way where it's we can go on the force play mound and test these things and verify that they're working and actually targeting the specific thing that I'm working on for my throw. So I think we can get very individualized with that, and it's only gonna help because like we know for that athlete, okay, like your average fastball velo is the highest when you're putting this much Z-force on your front leg, and your graph is the smoothest going into it. So it's like, if we can maximize that and we can see that, which we can, like I want to be as individualized as possible to maximize that, because we've got guys that throw from here, we've got guys that throw from here, and it's like they can all unite around the fact that like, okay, we don't want to walk guys, okay, we want to strike out guys, because the more you move up in higher levels, those things don't just get better. So it's understanding, okay, what are the normative ranges for guys that we need to operate in, but also like we can track and figure out what individualized things are going to make them better specifically for who they are, and understanding that.
I don't think individualized needs to be complex necessarily. Like with our pitching staff this year, like a lot of us do very similar long toss constraints or very similar like mound plyo drills. Like there's a lot of similarities within some of the drill work and stuff that we do, and I think just a lot of that comes back to what the data says, and I think that's why again like objective feedback is so important, because like you have to have a basis for these things. You have to have a deep understanding of these things, and you have to be able to relay it in simple ways to the players.
One quick point on that, and that's, I agree completely with what Dawson's saying. The hard part is so many places don't have access to a force plate mount. So many places don't have access to these higher level training tools. And so it's like, all right, well, if we don't have access to the most advanced data to give me comprehensive, objective results, what do I do then? And I think you trust kind of the player's ability to manage their own body, right? They've spent their whole life in their body, and they've spent their whole life aligning their body to be able to throw a baseball. And so trusting their ability of giving them a task and then kind of saying like their body's going to figure it out, right? I think we don't give enough credit to people of being able to figure out movement solutions to a problem. And so if you give a guy a problem of you need to throw harder, the best way to do that is kind of just to train to throw harder, right? It sounds dumb, but you need to throw hard to throw hard. And so when you don't have these really incredibly high objective data points, gather as much objective data as you can with the limiting factors that you have. And then after that, trust your players and trust yourself to implement the right ways to attack that.
Aiden, what an incredible segue. Thank you so much for that, because this is a topic we haven't gone into yet, and I'm very excited for it. This is probably one that in this la la land that we live in during seminars is very easy to talk about. We heard about it yesterday, and by all means, I'm a major supporter of this, but it's very difficult in application. We all want collaboration in the development process. We all want players to have a say, but when we get to the field, you guys need wins or you lose your job. It is that simple. So if a player approaches you or you approach a player and they say, well, I know to throw 94 miles an hour, I need this degree of hip shoulder separation at front foot strike, and I need this horizontal abduction angle with my throwing shoulder as I'm coming up into layback, and all these different really specific pieces that maybe they learned in facility life or just from consuming information online, and maybe they throw the piss out of the ball, but they don't get results in game. And ultimately, to advance or to win, you need outs. So players, we recognize that we have to earn the right to have a say in the development process. How do you guys think now you can earn that right, and maybe give some feedback to them on this?
I can start with this. So I first met John, who you guys heard speak yesterday, in my 5th year, and we had been working through some things that I was not doing at a high level, and it got to the point where I didn't throw for a good chunk of the season because I just like objectively was not throwing well. I was walking a lot of guys, not getting a lot of outs, not really striking out anyone, ERA through the roof, and it was like it got to a point where I sat down with our staff and I was like, hey, I understand that I'm a fifth year, like I'm turning 24 at the end of the year, like this is something that's hard for me, but I understand like what it looks like and I believe in what you guys are doing. Like, let's sit down and figure this out. I don't care if I don't throw for the rest of the year. Like, I want to go play summer ball and try and get signed, and I want to figure out like, how do I become the best version of myself, ego aside? And I know that's hard for a lot of people, especially in their last year to go and do, but I trusted them so much because of that coaching style that they revealed to me and showed me and helped me to understand and believe in, because they presented the information to me that I knew was working. They backed it up and they opened up their door for me to be able to walk in and cultivate that relationship in a way where I could go in and say something like that, even though it wasn't easy. And we ended up figuring it out, ended up throwing a lot towards the end of the year and was like our main guy out of the pen. But that wouldn't have happened if they didn't build that trust with me and show me like this is what we're gonna do and have that open door and work through things with me, because I didn't understand. I'm sure there were some things they didn't understand, but we had that open dialogue where we were able to just kind of talk through things and figure it out and then ultimately create a course of action that allowed me to get back on the mound and finish the year at a high level.
I just have a quick point, and it's that I think a lot of people underestimate how much players want to know and want to learn. You get into a lot of the weeds of the data and you know the numbers, and you think, oh, they're baseball players, like they're dumb, like they don't care about this. But I think obviously this panel is a representation of that we're all kind of nerds at the end of the day, right? We play this game because we love it, but also because you know there's something intangible about that, and a lot of that has to do with the numbers and the objective results and the objective feedback. And even players that don't necessarily want to dive in a bunch, they still like the feedback, they still like the numbers and the objective data.
I have a couple more things. One is I think it's very important for a coach to not only recognize like what an athlete needs to get better at, but like also what they're currently good at. I think that's something that a lot of people I've seen historically is like, oh, like you need to work on this, you need to work on this, you need to work on this, and then you lose sight of the thing that you're actually good at. And like I think the Wake Forest guys brought up a good point yesterday of like, all right, maybe we can gain 2 miles an hour in the mocap lab, but now you're like crazy over the top slot, drops here, your shape's flattened out, like you're not nearly as effective as you were before. And that kind of brings me to my other point, which is this idea of like the XY problem, which I think the way it's framed is essentially like people have a proxy for what they're actually trying to accomplish, and then they solve for the proxy rather than what they're actually trying to accomplish. A very basic example of this is like my friend and I were at like a baseball game or whatever, and he knew someone on the team and whatever. He was like, we had to go pick up tickets, and he's like, oh, I think we have to go to like this special employee pickup window. And so we went up to will call and we just go, do you know where the employee pickup window is? Well, our question is not where is the employee pickup window. Our question is, how do we pick up these tickets? And we could have just got those tickets from will call, but we basically asked the wrong question, which we thought was a proxy for solving the original problem. And so I think this happens a lot in baseball. Whether that's you're solving for velocity, okay, great, but now your arm slot, drops or whatever, your shape gets worse. I'm a submarine guy myself, so if I optimize for velocity, my arm would be up here, but I would be substantially less effective, and I wouldn't be able to get outs as well as I had in my career. Not always very well, but the key is like and I coach students a lot with, oh, like we want first pitch strike percentage, or we want zone. I think an easy example would be like zone percentage. Okay, but higher zone percentage does not always equal like better results on the mound either, right? Like in an 0-2 count, you don't want to be throwing fastballs down the middle, and so knowing that like it's okay to have proxies or heuristics for like what you think will lead to success, but I think it's important to keep the actual thing you're trying to solve for in mind, rather than like only chasing the proxy or only chasing the metric that you're talking about.
We good on that piece? Cool. Okay. So this has kind of been brought up a couple times loosely, but I want to revisit it. we talked about having direction in our plans or team pillars or things of that nature. Pillars were talked about yesterday. I think it was the Ole Miss crew talked about how the team votes on their pillars. Aiden, I know this is one of the things you were passionate about when we were setting this up, is the objectivity surrounding pillars and what those actually mean. Because now this goes right back to collaboration in development, right? You don't know what to do if your pillar is be a good teammate. Like, let's face it, these guys could be the worst people on the planet, and if they pitch as well as they can, they're going to be in the show. It does not matter how they treat people at the end of the day. Yes, I'm not saying be an asshole, be a great person. But if that is your pillar, how do you know as a player what to actually get better at? So now, guys, what do you think is valuable in setting those pillars with your organization, with your coach, so you truly can have that collaborative development and you know what to work on?
I think it's just laying out like what you value, and then ultimately like educating the players on like why that's the case and why you put that forward. One thing we were really big on this year was just like understanding what specifically like you did at a high level, and then sticking to that and like having communication with it. So on the pitching side specifically, like here's an example. When I was high, like I would get off the mound, and after an outing, our coach would walk up to me and be like, hey, like, you didn't throw your sweeper at the usage that we were looking for. Like, it's grading out as your best pitch, and this is very effective, but like, you only used it 25% of the time in the game. And it's like, understanding that, okay, we've created a pillar of communication, and he's laid out the goals that he wants me to have. Like, I'm already on the same page with him. So when I hop off the mound and we have that dialogue back and forth, like I know exactly what his expectations were. And when he says, he's like, yeah, you know what, you're right. Like that was an expectation we laid. And then just going back to that more broad question of like, how do we instill pillars like this to where now we can approach players and like understand like, okay, we've already gone over this. I know what you value. I know what we value as an org, and like, how do we continue to like circle back to these things and understand like what you're looking for and like me buying into that?
Everybody good on this one? Cool. All right, going back to something we were starting to address earlier, but we probably didn't tie a bow on it, so we're gonna try to do it now. We talked all about the problem of stating when you don't know something. I think as an industry, we accepted that for a long time of saying, well, that's okay, I'm gonna find out, which is great, right? We should always have this pursuit of knowledge. You guys are expected to always pursue greatness. On our side, we should be expected to pursue the knowledge to help provide that vehicle or the roadmap to get you to greatness. So if somebody is going to say they will find something out, what do you guys want to see as players as evidence that we are actually doing our job to support you?
I mean, I think going back to Josh's original point, like if you're always saying I don't know, it's just like that's just not good enough. I think every once in a while, when you say it, it's fine if you have a dialogue moving, but you need to earn that right a little bit from the player of being able to say I don't know. And this happens in pro ball a lot of like, we're dealing with incredibly complex topics. We're going through a lot of different things, there's a ton of moving parts. And if I'm constantly just hearing like, I don't know what to do, I don't know how to develop, I don't know how to get to the big leagues, then that's not helping me, that's not helping the team. Because there's no road either way. And so I think developing a system where it's like, I can get objective feedback consistently, I can get numbers, after game reports, after bullpen reports, just whatever, where I can continually develop is incredibly important. I don't know if there was really nothing, nuanced in there, but.
Yeah, I mean, I think ultimately it comes back to like just not asking the same question, like saying I don't know the same question twice. I also think it's important to recognize, like, when we do have data, not just assuming that that tells the whole story as well. I think one of the most important parts of working with data and models is understanding the drawbacks and the blind spots of the data and the models that we're using. And I think it's as simple as that. You have to understand where the thing fails in order to use it appropriately, rather than just using it as like the end all be all. Like this is what this model says, or this is what this metric says.
I liked what Hejka said there about, like, as a player, you don't want to hear "I don't know" twice to the same question. Like, from the player side of things, like, I really just want to see the needle moving in the direction of the question, and I just want to see the coach. You know, like, if I'm going to appreciate the honesty of the coach saying that he doesn't know but he's going to find out, then I think as the player, it's fair to expect him to actually be trying to find out. So.
We are nearing the end here, so I'm going to make a couple closing remarks and then pass it off to these guys for closing remarks as well. Super appreciative to y'all's participation so far, and of course, y'all tuning in this morning. But we had this talk today, again, just re-anchoring everything about making data, information, and storytelling available for these guys in an actionable manner. Not just giving you a report for the sake of giving you a report, but giving you the tools you need in the way you need it to be as good as you can be. That said, if there's one thing that I can take away, just summarizing everything you guys made available to me in this conversation, is that first and foremost, you want that data and information available to you. Then from there, we can figure out the best way to communicate the data, tell the story, write the roadmap. And the story for that for me, or where this becomes super impactful, is I'm not a PhD, an MD, a biomechanist, or anything like that. Neither is my partner, Daryl. We created FlexPro Grip off of publicly available information from all the research that's been done for the past 30, 40 years, going back to Frank Job's surgery on Tommy John way back when. The only reason we got to this point was because of the pursuit of knowledge given available information. How much easier would that have been for us if someone had a roadmap, or someone could assist us along the way with how that story needs to be told, or how we could link those things together. But much like Dawson went through in his development, he had all the information available to him. It was just about piecing it together. Or Hejka being so unique as a submariner that he needed to lead the way the second he stepped foot on college. So he's been able to lead his own development. He's led from the front because he's been forced to. Blake, he's been at the same school for 3 years. It's weird to say, he's had 3 different pitching leadership groups to work through. So he's had to both earn the trust of those coaches every step of the way, and they've had to earn the trust of him. Aiden's been, 4 different locations in the past 5 years, between 2 D1s, a JUCO, and now the Marlins. So constantly in new environments, but leaning back on an individual that you trust in Campos, who you've been with for the ages. So guys, that's kind of my wrap up, in the sense that at a minimum, let's make all the information available. People, or all of us here, have the same goal. We want to be successful, we want to win, we want to make it to the big leagues. If we at least make information available, that's an amazing step 1. Step 2 is working together to create that roadmap, whether it's for injury prevention or it's to getting out and eventually win a game. So that's it for me. I'm going to pass it over to these guys to see if they have any closing remarks. We're good? All right, cool. So then to wrap things up, I'm guessing there's still some muffins, bananas, and croissants and stuff available. Definitely grab them because we can't take them in the auditorium. But thank you for joining us this morning.